Well, thank you, Carol, and good morning, all. I hope you can hear me. It is absolutely wonderful to see that so many of you have joined us this morning, and I'm really grateful that we can be together online, if not face to face this year. And I'm just grateful that so many of you have decided to join us. So thank you for that. So I'm going to talk about collaboration and collaborative leadership this morning, and I have some slides that I'm going to try and share with you now. So if Carol or somebody can let me know when the slides come up, that would be great, as my connection is a little bit slow this morning. Right, so I'm going to talk about collaboration. I'm going to talk about finding synergies in the voluntary sector academic collaborations, what the opportunities and challenges might be. So I'm going to talk about collaboration for a variety of reasons. Now, the first reason perhaps is that interorganizational collaboration continues to be important for organizations who wish to address ambitious social challenges that are beyond any single organization to tackle effectively on its own. And this need to work collaboratively to address social challenges is, of course, not new, but there is perhaps a change in how organizations work together and how they work together about. So in terms of the latter, of course, the present pandemic has further exposed social inequalities and the need to focus on the most vulnerable in our communities, as well as prioritizing health and well-being for all. So I suspect we'll talk a little bit more about that as the day progresses. Now, the second reason is that we in the Centre for Voluntary Sector Leadership rely on working collaboratively with stakeholders outside our university because we try to ensure that what we focus on are the right kind of problems and issues, and that our work can be of benefit to individuals and organisations who work across the voluntary sector here in the UK and elsewhere. And the third reason is that managing to collaborate is a knowledge field, just like accounting and finance and HR, if you like. And so we believe that it is important to continue to develop this knowledge field about collaboration collaboratively, if it is to be useful in practice. So if you like, I'm going to talk about how to develop our understanding of collaboration collaboratively. And if that's not too confusing or convoluted, then please do bear with me for another 10 or 15 minutes. So in this presentation, I am drawing on an ongoing program of research in which my colleagues and I aim to develop knowledge and insight about how to govern, lead and manage interorganizational collaboration. And I'm conscious that some of you may have heard me talk about aspects of this program before. So I apologize to those of you for whom this might feel a little bit familiar. My aim, though, is to go beyond what we have shared before and to enable us to begin to think about how and what we might wish to explore jointly over the next few months and years. So this will be relate to what kind of issues and topics we feel we need to understand better, who the stakeholders might be, and how we best go about developing that understanding, given that the varying needs and the resource constraints that we all have. And we will come to some examples of this shortly. So when I talk about collaboration, or what do we mean by collaboration? When I use the word collaboration, I'm talking about any situation in which individuals from one organization work together with individuals in other organizations. So individuals, if you like, are typically representing their organizations as they seek to work jointly together. So we're talking about bringing together whole organizations and not just individuals working in a team within an organization. So over the years, we've worked with a large number of collaborations that have been concerned with issues such as child poverty, hate crime, substance abuse, neighborhood regeneration, and so on, a number of such social issues. But my expertise, if I have any at all, is about managing across organizational boundaries, as opposed to having in-depth understanding about the complexity of these social issues. But typically, therefore, the collaborations that we have worked with have involved more than 2 organizations. They're often very complex in their structures. So on the right side of this slide, you'll see an example, and this is a figure of a collaboration that I was involved with a few years ago. It's city neighborhood regeneration. It was a massive collaboration that was set up and which had public funding. And so the detail of this example is not important, but what is important is perhaps to visualize that collaborations can get very complex in their structure and so on. Especially when it involves a large number of organizations that are different in size, different in shape, different in what they're trying to achieve, different in terms of how they work, and so on. So it is these differences in resources, experience, and expertise, though, that provide collaborations with the opportunity to create what we call collaborative advantage. That is, it creates the opportunity to achieve something that organizations could not achieve if they work on their own. Okay, so unfortunately, our research program has also taught us that seeking collaborative advantage is seriously time-consuming, and that collaboration should perhaps only be considered if it is possible to envisage or if it is possible to envisage some form of collaborative advantage. So on the left side of the slide, you will see 10 tips about collaboration that articulates some of the reasons why it might be difficult to achieve collaborative advantage. So it talks about the need to spend more time, the need to be prepared to compromise, to continuously think about how you build trust, to pay attention to how you communicate, to remember that organizations work differently, that what's easy to achieve in your organization might be harder to achieve in another, that power play is always, or that power differentials are likely to be there between organizations, so that negotiating power is always part of the deal, and also that collaboration involves being both facilitative and directive in your leadership towards others. And similarly, on the right side of this slide, you can see what we've tried to capture a number of issues, which are typically those that individuals say are causing anxiety and rewards, if you like. And over the years, we have sought to try to understand the complexity that underpins most of these issues. So it is possible, for example, to explore further what is involved in collaborative leadership and what is involved in managing cultural diversity, for example. And I picked out those 2 because I'll say a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. These tips and issues is summed up in the notion of collaborative inertia, which is that in practice, the rate of output is slow, and even successful outcomes involve pain and hard grind. All right, so the final kind of introductory concept that I'd like to share with you pulls together the complexity of collaboration structures along with advantage and inertia. And it is that collaboration can be understood as paradoxical in nature. So collaborative contexts can be seen as complex webs of overlapping dynamic hierarchies and systems that comprise competing designs and processes that are necessary to achieve collaborative advantage. So in other words, it's saying that you are not likely to be able to achieve collaborative advantage unless you are also prepared to risk the experience of collaborative inertia. So we see collaborative advantage and collaborative inertia as a kind of an overarching tension, with collaborative advantage being the guiding light and collaborative inertia often being what best captures what individuals experience in practice. And so the overarching sort of question for us throughout the years, therefore, has been, why does inertia rather than advantage happen? And what is it that we need to do in terms of governing, leading, and managing interorganizational collaboration in order to achieve advantage rather than inertia? Okay, so that is possibly where we were a few years ago. But I said in my introduction that there may have been a change in terms of how organizations collaborate. And what I had in mind is that over the last few years in the UK, at any rate, we have seen we've had severe austerity policies, and of course we are now still in the midst of a pandemic. So what some of you have told us is that there is an increasing pressure to collaborate, and that the requirement to do more with less challenges individuals and their organizations to tackle cross-cutting societal issues in increasingly efficient ways. So when we have been speaking with individuals who are involved in collaborative leadership over the last few years, we've heard many of you say that, well, collaborative working might have been the ethos, but it wasn't a sort of functional, pragmatic approach that it has to be now. So I wonder if there is a shift in emphasis away from the kind of collaborations that have been talked about, that we've talked about just now, the kind of collaboration where the guiding light is collaborative advantage, and towards more of a functional, pragmatic approach, whereby collaboration is more about efficiency and the belief that collaboration can be a pragmatic solution to shortages in resources. And if that is the case, is it therefore also the case that we have more pragmatism and less advantage, less collaborative advantage? So I'd like to think about, or I think this leads to quite interesting research questions potentially. So firstly, I'd like to if we could explore whether or not it is the case that we have had this shift towards a more pragmatic collaboration, and if so, what are the relevant insights for collaborative leadership? And I know we have a number of speakers today that are going to talk about different aspects of leadership, including leadership diversity and inclusion in leadership challenges from the perspective of the local, voluntary and community sectors, ethics in leadership, as well as continuing. We also continue to have a conversation about leadership development. And so it is possible that we will begin to explore some of these questions already in the course of today. Right, another new area of emphasis for our work in CVSL has also emerged out of working closely with you and trying to be responsive to what some of you are telling us that the needs are right now. And this what I'm going to talk about now, I'm going to see presented as a sort of a development of the cultural diversity theme that I mentioned earlier. So we know that cultural diversity is hugely important and that it can be difficult to understand. So here is a quote from someone who managed a cultural diverse collaboration, who said, well, if I'm honestly speaking, getting to grips with the cultural issues was a big thing. And, you know, we all see experience and differences and similarities in how individuals behave, how they communicate, how organizations differ in how they do things, which may be down to different values, procedures, and policies, and so on. And in our research into cultural difference, which on my part is quite limited anyway, we see these differences stemming from sort of communities of belonging. And these communities of belonging may be associated with national, organizational and professional cultures, for example, or it might also be something entirely different, like students and staff, youth and pensioners, private and public sector organizations, and so on, a number of different types of communities. And sometimes it's helpful to draw a boundary temporarily anyway, in order to understand what the issues are that might be causing both synergy. So, for example, where do different perspectives that enable us to do different things or do things better come from? So we know that there are advantages of bringing together organizations and individuals who think about and see things differently, and that creates some form of synergy that we can draw on in order to better the way we work. And similarly, where does inertia come from? So, for example, what might the differences in values and communication be that cause friction and misunderstanding? So it's possible to see this as a culture paradox, actually, whereby you see that if organizations, if partners are too similar, then maybe they lack that distinct form of expertise, and that is a limit in terms of creating advantage. And similarly, if organizations and individuals are too different, then perhaps they have two different ways of working together, and which makes interacting and working together in order to achieve advantage difficult. So we see this as a sort of an overarching tension that it's helpful to think about. Okay, so here is another quote, and this is a current quote from one of the current projects that we're working about, and it is reflecting perhaps on social injustice. So you have to be conscious about it, not anxious, just be aware that there would be things that might need delicate interaction with in order to get it right. So under this kind of theme, we have a number of projects underway that are seeking to address some of the social injustices and inequalities that are ongoing in our society, and which the pandemic has brought into sharp relief. So under the theme of what I call cultural diversity, we have a current research project that explores Black and minority ethnic leaders' leadership development needs as they collaborate with policy makers and police across in MK in order to address racial inequalities, and it's very much in the context of COVID. And my colleague Fidel Mutvarasibo will explore this further in one of the workshops this afternoon. We also have PhD students who are addressing issues that are related to this theme. So, for example, we have Gavin Mayers, who is exploring diasporic identities as a basis for inter-organization collaboration in Caribbean charities. And Gavin joined us in February as a PhD student, and we will hear a little bit more from him later as well. And we also have a very exciting leadership development program being developed at the moment. It's called Black Leadership Empowerment Program. And so these are just some of the examples of the work that we're doing at the moment that we are doing because we're working collaboratively with the community, and also because we're trying to pick up on what you're telling us is important at the moment. So I hope I've given you a sense of the kind of work that we have done, and that for us anyway is a way of finding synergies in voluntary sector academic collaboration. So as we go forward, would like to talk to you about what we should focus on and how we should do it. We certainly wish to continue working collaboratively and to develop our understanding of collaboration and collaborative leadership, as well as leadership in the voluntary sector more generally. And throughout the day, we will explore many of these issues around collaboration, collaborative leadership, related topics on ethics, for example, and leadership development. And also one of the workshops in the afternoon is dealing specifically or inviting you to talk to us specifically about how we can create knowledge exchange events that might be useful to you. So I'm going to stop there, and thank you for listening, and I'm going to hand you over to Carol.
Thank you so much, Siv, for that. And tech is all going well this morning so far, so that's really good. We could hear you brilliantly. Thank you, and see the slides, which is always that moment when you wonder, but that's all going well. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. After each of our speakers, we're going to have a very short reflection from somebody from CVSL, and this time it's my turn, but of course we're speaking from CVSL, Siv's speaking from CVSL, so slightly different this time. But as Siv has said, we've been over the last year or so holding increasing number of webinars, we've been blogging, speaking at events, and curating some of our thinking and ideas that come out of our research, our academic research, but trying to reframe that in a way that is really useful for people in practice. And as Siv has described, we have a number of projects which are very practice focused and wanting to make a difference to real issues out in the social environment. It's really interesting as researchers who work with theories around collaborative working and around collaborative leadership to actually bring those theoretical ideas into thinking through how our partnerships between academia and practice really work. This is absolutely a key topic for me because I actually spent 25 years in practice before I became an academic. So bridging what sometimes seems like a really big gap and bringing the two communities together and understanding where we have overlaps and what we can usefully do together and how we achieve collaborative advantage. So using that idea of collaborative advantage is really useful to us, but recognizing also the propensity for partnerships to fall into collaborative inertia. But it is interesting to reflect on whether there has been a change and whether we should understand collaboration differently since both austerity and then more recently the pandemic, and what that means in terms of using the theory. Do we need to actually revisit some of the theoretical ideas in terms of people's experiences, and actually how can the theory help with understanding what's going on in practice? So this afternoon, many of our workshops talk around some of these issues, and there are opportunities for us to learn from you, as well as hopefully you to get some insights into our research and teaching experiences. So we really look forward to that. Daniel, my colleague Daniel Haslam and myself have a workshop specifically on collaboration and exploring with you whether that looks different in this post-pandemic or nearly post-pandemic context. But also Siv will be leading a workshop on knowledge exchange and what kind of activities we might develop into the future from CVSL that work for you as practitioners, as well as making really good use of the theory that we develop through our research. So that's going to be a bit of a theme for us today, and thinking on in terms of what that means for your leadership in the sector, our leadership, and our shared development of leadership in the sector, and our interest in pursuing that.